G'day guys, today I'm going to be changing out the exhaust on the BT-50 here. So I'll be going through the full removal process of the existing exhaust from the turbo back, and I'll be fitting in a brand new Mandrel bent 3-inch exhaust into the car. So I will be covering the full install process and the removal of the existing exhaust. There'll be chapters down below if you want to skip to that. I'll also be covering the costs, what I chose and why, comparing it to the two nearest competitors. I'll go over the weight differences between the stock exhaust that we're taking out and the new exhaust that we're putting in. And I'm just briefly going to touch on some of the decision-making things in regards to different types of stainless steels and the benefits of getting an aftermarket exhaust. So the reason I'm doing the exhaust now is because I'm kind of getting towards the end of the build and what I had planned for the build. This is not a high priority job for me, the exhaust. It's something that I want to do because eventually I want to get an engine tune, but I don't want to do an engine tune and then change the exhaust afterwards because everything changes when you change the exhaust. So for me it was low priority, but there are some good benefits to be had. On most of the websites they will claim that there's about a 10 to 12% increase in performance, and they also claim about 8 to 12% in fuel savings. So obviously this is hard to pin down exactly, depends on each car and how people drive. But if I saw 10% fuel savings, then to me it's a pretty worthwhile investment. Outside of this, a lot of people like the noise that the aftermarket exhausts create. I personally would prefer that it added no noise whatsoever and it sounded as silent as possible. For me, the main things were dropping the engine temperatures out of the turbo and cooling down the whole system, making the car run more smoothly. The increased performance is good, but the increased fuel savings is even better. So I've gone with the Legendex 3-inch from the turbo back, obviously with a cat and a muffler and everything because I'm not after the noise. I want it to be as quiet as possible and road legal as well. So I was only really tossing up between a few companies. There was Legendex, which is Genie exhaust, and then Manta Pro, which everyone seems to love, and Beaudesert. So we'll just have a quick look at some of the things stated on the website. So I've got a few tabs open here. This is the Legendex site. This is the actual exhaust that I bought. So I paid $14.50. I got a discount and saved a bit on shipping, so all up was about $14.70, but it's actually on special at the moment for $13.05. Now this is 3-inch turbo back. This is pre-DPF, so it starts from the back of the turbo. 409 stainless, we'll get to that in a second. 10-year off-road warranty, so a very good warranty. I had no interest in the Berserker pipe, just want a standard normal sounding exhaust. Here's a little image here showing the claimed power increase and stuff. So just quickly, the main points here: 3-inch 409, Mandrel bent, fuel savings 8 to 12%, power increases approximately 10%, 10 years warranty. The muffler is 304 external with 409 internal. So the dump pipe with this ceramic coating is insulated and it drops the temperatures by about 200 degrees. Now you've got all your fittings if you want to put exhaust gas temperature probes in. I'm not going to do that. All factory mount points, so nice easy install. 800 degree thermal paint as well for extra protection. So $14.50 is the standard price. With the Beaudesert, this was actually what I was going to get, is the rugged with a muffler, again because I want it as quiet as possible, $14.60, so same price, but the shipping for this was $385, which ruled it out. And Beaudesert do a 2 3/4 inch Mandrel bent instead of a 3-inch. The differences won't be massive, but they say that the 2 3/4 inch is actually more suited to this engine. Now Beaudesert differs in that they use 441 grade stainless steel instead of 409. And then they have the Ultimate, which uses 304. But me personally, I wouldn't use 304. I'd go for the 441. Just looking at some of the differences between them on other websites, which you can Google all this sort of stuff yourself. But to me, the 441 seems a lot better suited to the exhaust than the 304 did anyway. If I was choosing out of the two from Beaudesert, I would have gone for the rugged, less expensive, but the 441 is also better at handling changes in temperature, which your exhaust is exposed to a lot, and it's also more corrosion resistant. So that's the Beaudesert exhaust that I was going to get. And then if we jump over to Manta Pro, stainless steel pipes, and here you can see $2,109. That is what I call a rip-off because they're very good quality, probably about the same quality. It seems like they're trading on their name a little bit there. I wouldn't pay an extra $600 for that. I'd go for a Beaudesert. If I was on the East Coast, or Legendex, whatever worked out cheaper for me, I'd go for. The Manta Pro is just way too expensive for the same thing. They're using 409 stainless. It's also Mandrel bent. It has a 10-year warranty, but so does the Legendex. So as far as I can tell, there's nothing that justifies this price for the Manta exhaust. So Legendex are using a 409 stainless, and so are Manta. Beaudesert use a 441. They use a 2 3/4 inch instead of 3 inch because they claim that they have seen better results. Beaudesert offer a 6-year manufacturing warranty. So most automotive exhausts are 409 stainless. It's a good mix of being good at handling heat cycles. So for example, a really hot exhaust that gets dumped into cold water, like a 4-wheel drive exhaust might. It's what all your OEM exhausts will be made out of. So it's a mixture of being, I guess, cheaper to produce and make, but also long lasting. 441 grade stainless outperforms 409 in oxidation, corrosion resistance, and high temperature strength. I still think 441 is the better choice, but most of the aftermarket exhausts will be 409. So you see Manta use a 409 stainless steel for the pipes and 304 on the muffler, which appears to be the same as Legendex, 304 muffler with 409 internals. So some of the information available on the websites, this is the Manta Pro website again, and they just go on about the differences here in 409, 304 and aluminized steel. So using 409 is to prevent the brittleness and cracking that can happen with higher grade stainless steel. So it's used in the heat cycling parts. 304 on the muffler skins and exhaust tips where they want that polished aesthetic, but it is not exposed to as high temperatures. And Legendex and Beaudesert have FAQ pages, frequently asked questions, so there's lots of good information to be had here as well. We'll just breeze through a couple of the more relevant ones. So again, we've got the spiel here about 409 stainless steel being the superior choice. Now obviously they're going to say 409 is better and Beaudesert will say 441 is better, but basically the same thing. 409 is a good combination for long life, corrosion resistance and the heat cycling. Now they have this spiel about 304 stainless steel versus 409, and it's going on about 409 being ferritic stainless steel, but so is 441, which is offered by Beaudesert. Ferritics are best suited for high temperature applications that require corrosion resistance and high strength. It is better for the cat, which is exposed to high temperatures, than 304, and this is why they use 304 for mufflers and exhaust tips, as does Manta Pro. So a few benefits. The main ones for me was the ceramic coating on the cat or the dump pipe, and what this does is insulates the engine bay from the exhaust heat, giving a reduction of 100 to 200 degrees Celsius. That means the engine can run smoother and with colder air intake temperatures. The 10-year warranty is awesome. That's the same as the Manta Pro, the two that use the 409 stainless. Beaudesert offers 6 years. They use 441. I'm not sure if that is the reason, that's just a guess on my part. And you got your specifically designed diesel cats. You got this double braid stainless flex. The other one that interests me, the 800 degrees thermal paint. In theory, and hopefully it does work, but this can reduce the temperature transfer from the underside of the car to the car itself. I'm not sure if it's going to make a big difference, but at least it's there. Now, I actually had decided to go with the Beaudesert, the 441 stainless steel, but the shipping was $385 compared to the Legendex system, which was about $96 freight. I also found a coupon code and I got about $72 off that. And in the end, it worked out about $400 cheaper to go to the Legendex. In saying that, Legendex was obviously my second choice. Now the difference to the average person between 409 and 441, it's not going to make a difference to me, the end user. So I was more than happy to jump over to Legendex and get their system instead. As for Manta Pro, I'm sure the exhausts are good, but it is not a $600 or $700 better exhaust than the exhausts offered from Beaudesert and Legendex. So Manta Pro was really easy to rule out because it's just a little bit overpriced. So with stainless steel, it's not all about being the most resistant as possible, because the more chrome added into the system, with the 304 for example, it becomes a lot more brittle and it isn't as good as handling hot-cold changes. So if you're in a four-wheel drive specifically and doing water crossings for example, you might actually be better off with 409 or even like an aluminized steel, which is less likely to crack. All your factory exhausts are 409, so there's nothing wrong with the 409 system. The manufacturers obviously want them to last as long as possible. So this seems to be the happy middle ground. So 409 from Legendex, 409 with Manta Pro. Beaudesert is offering a 441 system or a full 304 system. The Beaudesert exhaust was also 2 3/4 inch, whereas the Manta Pro and the Legendex exhausts are 3 inch. A Okay, so in the engine bay, near the airbox, you got the alternator here. Down here is your turbo. That is a heat shield for the turbo. And down there is the dump pipe, or the cat. That's where the highest temperatures are normally found. This is the exhaust manifold. Remove this bolt, or at least spray it with WD-40 now, because we've got to get the heat shield off. To do that, we remove this wheel cover here with these plastic clips, Phillips head screwdrivers. And you can see I've sprayed the heat shield bolts now with WD-40. Now with that internal wheel guard removed, this is what we can see now. Again, there's the heat shield. This bolt is for the turbo, the cat to the turbo. We'll remove that later. First, we just want to get the heat shield off. So there's a bolt, which I'll show you on the GoPro now. This one here, it's a 10mm socket. That is one of 3 bolts for the heat shield. The other one is this one here. You can see I've got a 17mm socket on it. So where that socket is a nut that needs to be removed to get the heat shield off. Here's a closer look at it. So that nut is on the same stud as one of the cat to turbo nuts. Now if we follow the exhaust down, you got the underside looking up now. We have this bracket holding the cat to the engine. So again, we'll come back to this later, but you might want to give everything a spray. And working towards the back of the car, we've got these flanges. Again, spray everything just to let the WD-40 set, and it'll be easier to remove these. And if you can loosen them, just try and loosen them, but don't remove them yet. With the heat shield off, we've got these 17mm nuts. There's 3 to get off. Here's one looking from the bottom. So we've sprayed all them. Then we go to the back of the car, we'll start taking the exhaust off. So while we let the WD-40 sit, we'll remove these hangers. Now, to do this, lube it up with WD-40, and you can pinch it with something like this, or multi-grips. But to be honest, I did 1 or 2 like this, and then all I had to do after that was just WD-40, make sure you're wearing gloves, and you can work them off just by using a circular motion, and they will give. Just wear gloves in case your hand slips and you hit another part of the chassis. So with the exhaust lowered off the hangers, now we can start to remove it from the back of the car towards the front of the car. The WD-40 should have had time to set, so these bolts hopefully come undone. All my rubbers were in good condition. Now this gasket, we want to reuse this, so try not to damage that. Now these bolts were very tight due to all the heat that goes through and the corrosion, so a breaker bar with a ratchet head, and double up on your spanners if you can't get a breaker bar in there. I had to use this to loosen one of them, otherwise a breaker bar was needed. And once we got the turbo off, get under the car, remove this bracket, the 4 bolts, and then you can lower it down from outside the car underneath. This is what we're looking at here. Here's that gasket that we want to reuse, so we'll clean that up with some brake and parts cleaner and it should be good to go. So in the bag we got 6 bolts here for the flanges with spring and flats. I've got an extra flat there, and then you've got the self-locking nuts just behind it. You've got these 2 M10 stud bolts. Now for some reason we don't replace the longest stud bolt, so they provide 2 new ones which we'll have a look at later, and not a third, not sure why. And then you have a rubber mount for the extra rubber mount. So with the instructions, it's weird, they do say that you keep the gasket and turbo nuts and bolts safely aside for reinstall. It's not quite the case. We do have new studs to install, which it does state on the next page to install the 2 M10 studs. So the instructions are a little bit of a contradiction, but whatever. So these are the 2 studs we want to remove. You can see the one down here with the arrow and the one with the 2 nuts on it. You have to lock the 2 nuts together to get these out. It's not just going to come out, it'll be very tight. And to be honest, if you can't get it out after too much hassle, I'll just reuse them, because this one we reuse anyway. This is the one that takes the heat shield for the turbo, and that one stays in there. We don't get a replacement for that. Now I'm not fitting an EGT temperature gauge probe, so I'm installing all these bolts, but first I'm just going to put anti-seize on everything to do with the exhaust. Is going to get anti-seize, because otherwise you'll never get it out later due to the heat cycles. This gasket, flatten these tabs out, and that is just to fit it over the new thicker gasket mating face, and then we'll just give it a clean with brake and parts cleaner as much as possible. But then also using a paper towel, I'm going to clean the other side in the engine bay without spraying brake and parts cleaner into the turbo. Just spray it onto the towel and wipe it down. So with anti-seize on, we're driving these new M10 studs in. You can see the one up top already done, and anti-seize on it. Just lock 2 nuts together and tighten it up until you get thread coming out the back, so that way you have the strongest mount as possible because every thread is engaged, and it's good to torque up when we torque up the cat to turbo to 47 Newton meters. Now hang the gasket on these new studs and the old one, and then lift this cat up from the back, getting it over those studs, put the support bracket bolt in to hold it. Back in the engine bay, you can start tightening everything up finger tight. We don't want to tighten it up yet. Anti-seize on the old stud, and again everything's just finger tight as we start to move down the back of the car. And these bolts again just going to be finger tight for now, and then we'll go through and tighten everything once we have everything bolted in. That rubber in the kit is for this new hanger, which isn't part of the OEM system. The hanger is obviously, but the OEM exhaust didn't use it, so we put that on and continue towards the back of the car. Nothing special here, finger tight, flanges in between. After that, I'll go back to the front of the car. You can see the new gasket in there. I'll just go through everything from the front towards the back, except now I'll do it about 70% tightness. I'm not torquing everything yet, but I just want everything to firm up, and then we'll go back through the torque settings after that. So from under the car, you can see the flanges here in the middle, and these nuts and bolts. I've compressed the spring, but I haven't cranked it yet. So these new bolts are 14mm, and you shouldn't need a wrench on either side because the nut does grip. And then when you're doing the flanges, do them up evenly. So do a little bit on one side, then swap to the other side, so on and so forth. Now we go back to the front of the car and we'll start with the actual torque settings. This bolt down here, I've done, it's a 10mm socket. I've actually put Loctite on this one because it's not exposed to heat as much, and that is done to 25 Newton meters. So I torque these bolts here before I did that mounting bolt. These are 47 Newton meters. I'm using a crow's foot because the socket won't fit with the ratchet head because the dump pipe is a lot thicker and it has that ceramic coating on it. If you have a deep socket, you might be a little bit better off because you can get the ratchet head further away from the dump pipe. Otherwise, these crow's feet work really well. So 3 bolts, 47 Newton meters, and do them up evenly. So do each one to 30, for example, then do them up gradually to 47, so they're all at 47 at the same time. Once I've torqued that, I went through the rest of the exhaust flanges and did them tight, like really tight with a 14mm spanner. I wouldn't go crazy with a breaker bar. There are no torque settings provided for it, so just go really tight. We're going to have to go back through them after we test drive. So you can see I've got the heat shield on here. You don't have to put this on if you don't want. I've left this inner wheel guard cover off for the test drive. Going to go for at least half an hour just to get everything up really hot, and then let it sit for 3 or 4 hours. It takes a long time for the exhaust to cool. And once you've done that, we'll have to re-go over all of these bolts again. So you might not want to put that turbo heat shield on. If you disconnected your brake line, don't forget to connect that before you go for your test drive, the two 13mm sockets down here. Just get them back up for your test drive. Alright guys, so I've taken it for a test drive now. I went for a good half an hour or so just to let everything really heat up. Now the car's been sitting for about 3 hours or so. Go through all the bolts and re-torque them now that it's had the chance to heat up and cool down, because obviously you have expansion and contraction happening. Now you want to do this after your test drive, and then again after about 50 to 100 Ks you want to go through everything again, and hopefully that's the last time you have to do it after it's done a few extra cycles of heating up and cooling down. So if we look at the exhaust side by side, besides the size difference, you notice the new exhaust comes in 4 parts, the old exhaust was in 3 parts. The muffler does look smaller. Now as for the diameter, internal diameter of the original exhaust, I think it was about 56.38, which is 2.219 inches. That's an area of 24.96 centimeters squared, assuming that the shape is circular throughout and that it doesn't change in thickness throughout. And then if we compare that to the aftermarket one, we've got 73.04 here, but I got it to 73.6 was the highest I saw it, which is 2.89 inches in diameter. That works out to 42.56 centimeters squared if you take that area as a perfect circle. So we'll just make that assumption. We can work out the differences in size and see how much better flow we're getting. So it is 1.7 times bigger. So basically you got a 70% increase in area there, or in potential flow for the exhaust gases to escape. So you get a lot of benefits from that, obviously, as we've discussed with the cooling of the engine. So you get a lot better flow there, a lot better cooling. In regards to weight, the brand new package unopened was 24.1 kilos. With the old exhaust in there, it was 24.2, teetering on 3. So it's actually 24.3 once it's settled. That is a reduction of 0.2 kilos, and that mostly comes from that bracket that we removed that used to hold the cat to the engine mount. Alright, that's it for the exhaust install, and look, it's not too hard a job. I do recommend spraying everything beforehand, letting it sit for a little bit as you work on another part of the system. Get yourself a breaker bar with a ratchet head so you can get the breaker bar in different positions. If that doesn't work, like you saw, you can put 2 ring spanners together to get a little bit of extra leverage. The hardest part obviously is cracking the old exhaust bolts and nuts because they've gone through so many heat cycles. They are sometimes rusted or corroded on a little bit, but not too difficult a job. You've got a decent socket set with different size extensions. With the exhaust mounts, you saw one way to do it with a tool. You can use multi-grips, but I actually just ended up doing it with my hands in the end with some WD-40. You can work it off with your hands. Just make sure you're wearing gloves in case your hands slip. I do find it weird that they only provided 2 M10 studs. They don't provide a replacement stud that is longer, that holds the turbo heat shield as well. The other thing I found confusing is that your 3 M10 nuts for your studs don't come with any washers, which is fine, but it just seems odd that there's not a little washer, flat washer to go on and apply even pressure around that new cat into the turbo. Now, because we're working with exhaust systems, we want to anti-seize everything. The only bolt that I didn't put that on was the actual new cat bracket bolt to the engine mount. With that one I did Loctite 243, but that bracket bolt won't be exposed to as much heat as the other bolts. Now you will have trouble torquing the turbo studs, probably need a crow's foot adapter. You might get away with a longer socket. It really depends on your socket set and your setup that you've got, but I do recommend getting some crow's foot adapters if you want to torque them up to 47 Newton meters. Overall, this job does take a fair bit of time. If you include the fact that you have to go for a test drive and then let everything cool again, it could take you half a day to do, just purely because you have to wait for the exhaust to cool for a while. I'm pretty happy with the sound that it makes, in the sense that it doesn't make a lot when I'm driving around at cruising speed, because to be honest, I didn't want to hear it. I just wanted the benefits of the 3-inch, just want a better driving car. Slightly lighter than it was before, not by much. Total cost about $14.74. We'll just jump to the end screen now with the BT-50 running costs and weights of the build. Thanks for watching. So for me, it was low. Your pickup, did I change it back? She just got it off. Exhaust was also a tit.